Obtain anything you want, anything you need. Your mind's got the key ingredient, it's belief. They'll deceive with the negativity, but I just slide right by that energy. Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is Vandalia. I hope all of you are doing great today. Thank you so much for stopping by, and especially to all my subscribers. You guys are my biggest inspiration. I wanted to make sure that my content is filled with well-researched golden nuggets because this is the only way to do it, to prepare you for success. Everyone, I am so glad that you're here. So today's topic is data validation tool that you get in Excel. I want to walk you through on how to use these tools to help you quickly develop effective collaboration by automatically enforcing rules when it comes to preventing incorrect data entries, maintaining data integrities, as well as to ensure the data conform to the expected format. Because I think it is important to make sure that the data entered into your Excel spreadsheet is sensible and reasonable. So if we can prevent people from putting in wrong information, that would save us a lot of time from having to sort through the data and find out what's wrong. Now, what are some ways that we can do that? Here are some examples that data validation can do for you. So let's say that the user are updating the inventory records. In this case, we might want to implement quality control measures to ensure that users are entering numbers into specific identification label conventions. Another example would be we can restrict the user to input data by setting limit to a time format, which contains specific hours, specific minutes, or specific times for appointments schedule entry. We can also restrict the text length. So in this example, we can confine the text length to exactly 9 characters for employee identification numbers. Can also create drop-down lists of products and places. This is a great method to manage data entry. Or we want to prevent duplicates from being entered into our recruiting database tracker. So in this case, we want to allow unique values entries only. And what about birth date? We obviously can't have people entering some dates that's in the future. So for this one, we want to set up a date before a particular date, like for example, before today's date. And lastly, we can create meaningful error messages. This is a fantastic way to create your own error message to effectively communicate what may have gone wrong to the user. Excel data validation tool supports 8 type of criteria. The settings can be easily modified or removed. All right, let's just go ahead into the nitty-gritty and get started. Our scenario today, let's assume our company decides to keep drug screening as part of the pre-hire onboarding process. So I'm going to build a template for tracking the pre-employment drugs testing process. Let's say that our HR director wanted the admin personnel to monitor the candidate's journey effectively. Here we have 2 different spreadsheets, and the first spreadsheets contain the tracker template. What we have here is a table which show the candidate ID, candidate's name, date of birth, drug test results, cost center. Now, this is a unit in our organization's accounting system that tracks expenses. I've included this column per our HR division's requirement. And I've also included a timestamp. This is to record the date and time of day when the users are entering the information into this spreadsheet. I'll create data validation right here where the user can input the candidate ID. But I have to check the first two characters, a letter A and hyphen, then followed by 5 digits. The users will enter the information manually, but I don't want them to do a duplicate entry, so I want Excel to stop them when they enter the same candidate ID number again. The goal is to display a message box when trying to add a second instance. Now that we understand the rule, how do we do this check? We need to construct a custom formula. I'll use the second spreadsheet for checking formulas. The cell A2 contains the candidate ID positioned exactly the same as in the first spreadsheet. This alignment is crucial for the final formula to work correctly on the first spreadsheet. Let's start by figuring out a formula that will return true or false. We can check each single formula separately, and then we can combine all of the formula into one. We'll use the Excel clipboard as a helper. For the first check, I need to make sure that the total number of characters is equal to 7. And for that, I'll use the function len. So I click equals in this cell, select len, click into the cell A3, close parentheses, press enter. Here I got 7 for the number of characters, which is great. However, I still need this formula to return true if all its arguments evaluate to true and return false if one of more arguments evaluate to false for my data validation to work properly. If I do equal 7, press enter. Now it gives me true. Next, I want to add one more character just to test the formula. Now it gives me false. Alright, this formula is working fine and this has passed the validation test. For the second check, I need to make sure that the last 5 characters are numbers. And for that, I'll use the function isNumber with the right function. So I click equals in this cell, select isNumber, and then type right, open parentheses, click on cell A3, type 5, close parenthesis for isNumber, close parenthesis again for the right function, press enter. It gives me false. How come? Okay, let's see what's happening here. So if I select this entire string, press F9, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in between double quotation marks. So the double quotation marks means that Excel read it as text. Click escape to go back, or you can also press Ctrl Z. In order for Excel to read it as number, I need to use an additional function called the value function. So I will need to wrap those numbers within the value functions. I'm just gonna modify the formula up here in the formula bar. Now it gives me true. I want to select this string again and press F9 to show you what does look like now. As you can see here, the double quotation marks are not there anymore. Alright, this formula is working fine and this has passed the validation test. For the third check, I need to make sure that the first 2 characters are fixed to a letter A and hyphen. This is because our candidate ID numbers all start with a letter A and hyphen. I want to make sure there will be no mistakes about this. For that, I'll use the function left function equals to a hyphen. So I'll click equals in cell D3, select left, click here, comma, type 2, close parenthesis, click equals, then type a hyphen in double quotation marks, press enter. Now it gives me true. Let me check the value just to test the formula. Now it gives me false. Alright, this has passed the validation test. For the fourth check, I need to make sure that we don't allow people to enter duplicate ID numbers in this column A. And for that, I'll use the function countifs. Also, I want to lock the column, so I'll use absolute column reference only. Let me start by entering few ID numbers for our testing purposes. I'll click equals in cell E3, select countifs, select arrange like this. So it's a range of one cell, comma, and then I'm going to do as a second condition the same cell. So here I'm going to lock all columns. And then I'm also going to lock this first row reference in that range. And I'm going to leave the other two row references right here as open reference, just like that. Close parentheses, press enter. Then copy down the formula. So basically, we got 1, 1, we got 2 for this one, which was a duplicate. So this formula allow us to find out which occurrence that is. So what we can do, now we can convert this to a true and false formula. If I do greater than 1, press enter. Now it gives me false. And if I copy down, see, every time it's a duplicate of this ID number, it's gonna give me true. With data validation, however, we need to get true for values that actually allow to accept. So what I really need is to make sure that this false is true. So the opposite of what is currently being returned, because the false is the one that is allowed, since the false is not duplicate. Now, to make that happen, I need to add an additional function called not function. So not for this whole thing. I'm just going to modify the formula in the formula bar. And if I copy down the formula, now I'm getting the opposite. Great. The formula is working fine. This has passed the validation test. Next, we will combine all the formula into one. For that, I'll use the AND function. Now, the AND function is a logical function used to test multiple conditions at the same time, which returns true or false. And to make it a lot easier to manage a very long formula, I will also use the Excel clipboard to help me with this. So for those of you who don't know what this clipboard is, the Excel clipboard is a temporary storage space in which you can store the items you've copied or cut before and allow you to paste them whenever you need. So how does it work? Whenever you have certain data and you press Ctrl C, which is copy, it is copied onto your clipboard. which is an internal memory of Microsoft Office applications. I'll select cell F3, then navigate to the Home tab. I'll click on Clipboard. Then click on cell B3. Highlight the formula without the equal symbol. Then press Ctrl C. Then press Escape. Next, I'll click on cell C3. Highlight the formula without the equal symbols. Then press Ctrl C. Press Escape. Next, I'll click on cell D3. Highlight the formula without the equal symbol. Press Ctrl C. Press Escape. Next, I'll click on cell E3. Highlight the formula without the equal symbol. Press Ctrl C. Press Escape. I'll click on cell F3. Then from here, I'll use the formula bar to combine all the formula. Click on equals, select N. The open parenthesis appears. I'll click here, comma. Click here, comma. Click here, comma. Click here, close parenthesis, press enter. So now we should be able to use this formula to apply to data validation in the tracker template on the other spreadsheet, which is going to apply on column A, candidate ID. But first, I'm gonna copy this whole formula, including the equal sign, and paste this on my sticky note. So I'll select the formula, press Ctrl C, then click on Escape, then Ctrl V to paste this on my sticky note. Now let me switch to the other spreadsheet. I'll select the range that I need to apply this data validation. Then I navigate to the Data tab on the ribbon. Click on Data Validation. In this drop-down list, I'll select Custom Formula. So I'll copy the formula from my sticky note and paste it here. Press Enter. Now let's see if it's working. I'm gonna enter a few candidate ID here. Alright, now that the data validation is working fine for column A, let's create data validation for column B, where the users can input the candidate's name. So in this example, I want to set the limit for the text length between 1 to 16 characters. So I'll select the cells, then I'll click on data validation, choose the text length between 1 to 15 characters, and then press OK. Now data validation has been applied to column B. Let's try this out. I'm gonna put a couple of long names. Next, I'll create data validation for column C, where the users can input the birth date. For this cell, I want to set the limit up to current date because we obviously can have people entering some dates that's in the future. So I'll select the cells, then I'll click on data validation again. For the validation criteria, I choose the date. I will stick to between here in this drop down. Now I can type my start date 12/12/1935. This is just a random date. And my end date will be current date. And for that, I'll use the function today to keep it dynamic. Next, I'll create data validation for column C, where the user can input the results for the drug test. First, I'll select the cells I want to create a data validation rule for. Then, go back to data validation. I'll select list. And in the source field, there are two ways to do this. The simplest way is just to type in my list directly in the source separated by comma. So I'm going to put here schedule and then comma, cancelled, press OK to complete entering my data validation list. When I click in one of these cells, you can see this little drop down list. If I click on that, I choose the item that I want. Now, there is another way that we can do this. I can select the cell range that contain my list. In this example, my list is on the separate sheet. Here I have a table with cells information by categories already formatted into an Excel table called result list. I'll select these cells, then go back to data validation, still under list, and in the source field, let me delete this. Then I'll select the cell range that contain my list. As you may notice here, these are just absolute cell references. Now, if you are familiar with Excel table, you would expect to see the table structure reference of the table name and the column. Unfortunately, data validation isn't updated to allow you to type that in, but it does recognize the cell range references as table, so it works. Press OK. So when I click in one of these cells, I can choose from the categories available. However, if I go and add new item into my table, then I click in one of the cells again, my category list here is not updated. Well, I want this drop-down list to be dynamically updated at the same time when new items are added into the source table. How do I do that? To achieve that, I need to give my table a defined name. So let me go back to my list. I'll select the cells. Then I navigate to the Formula tab. Click Define Name. I'll call it Result Categories. Then press OK. Then go back to data validation. I'll select List. So now under the source, instead of the cell references, let me delete this. I press F3, then select result categories. So that's the name of range of my list table. Press OK. Now this time, if I go and add an item into my table source, then I go back to my tracker template, you can see it includes the new item to the data validation dynamically, even when my source is in a different sheet. Next, I want to show you how to extract a unique list from a larger dataset to generate your list for data validation drop-down list. Because 9 out of 10, this is what you'll need to do as a data analyst. So I'll use the unique function to do this. On this sheet here, I've got a table candidate journey that contains some drug test results. I'll click equals in this cell, select unique, the open parenthesis appears, then type the table name, the column, close parenthesis, press enter, and here they are. I want to wrap them in the sort function to have the list sorted automatically. And then I can reference this list as a source for my data validation drop-down list. I go back to data validation. I'll select list. So now under the source, I'll select just the first cell and then add the hashtag, press OK. So this will dynamically update my data validation drop-down list if any items are added or removed from the list. If I change one of the item here, for example, I can see it added to the list. And if I go to data validation, you see it also available here. And now let's create data validation right here where the user can input the cost center. Now our cost center for this process is number 8. So for this cell, I want to set an exact limit to number 8. So I'll select the cells, then I'll click on data validation. For the validation criteria, choose whole number. I will stick to equal to, then type 8, press OK. Now, data validation has been applied to column E. Let's try this out. Next, I want to track changes by inserting a timestamp automatically for the original entry of the drug test result. So every time one of the staff enters in the result into this table, Excel will automatically display timestamp, the current date and time. Now, although there is no built-in function in Excel to insert a timestamp, it is possible to create this with simple formula and a little tweak. So I want to show you the simplest way to do this. And the solution for this, I'm going to use the if function. First thing to do is to format these cells. So I'll select the cells, right click, select format cell, go to custom, then I'm going to type here DD YY HH colon press OK. The first thing that I need to check is whether D3 is not empty. If it is empty, then I don't want it to return the current date and time. The second thing I'm going to check is that F3 is empty. If it already contains a date and time stamp, I don't want it to override it. Now here, this is a nested if statement. So if these two things are true, I want it to return the current date and time. And for that, I can use the now function. The now function returns the current date and time. Next, I need to deal with the value of false for this nested if. So if F3 is not empty, Then I want to keep the value in F3. So we're just going to return F3, then close parenthesis for the nested if. Next, I need to deal with the values of false for the first if. So if D3 is empty, then I want to keep the cell blank in F3. Press enter. So here is the important step. It is because within my formula here, I have the second reference. I'm referring to the cell address F3 when the formula is already in F3. So we need to go to File, select Option, select Formulas. Then under the Calculation option, put a check mark here to enable iterative calculation. Then I can change the maximum iterations to only 1 instead of 100 times. Press OK. Now I'm going to delete my data here. Enter my data again. Now it gives me date and time when I enter that value. Next, I'm going to look at my input message on the column A for candidate ID. Now, the input message essentially is a little bit of help for the user to understand what kind of data you would expect them to add. So I'll select the cells, then I'll click on data validation, then I'll click on input message. For example, I type ID as the title of the message, then type start with a hyphen in input message. Press OK. Now, whenever the user clicks on these cells, you can see they get these little pop-up windows. So that gives them some information about what kind of data you're expecting. So if I now select these cells again, and then go back to data validation, and this time I'm gonna click on the error alert message. This basically allows me to modify the error message that pop up. And here we have 3 styles of error messages. I can change it from stopping to simply giving users a warning or giving them more information. I'll choose the stop style. I'll type invalid data in the title, then type please verify your data again in error message. And then press OK. So now if the user were to put a value which is outside of this rule, they get my custom message and it gives them an opportunity to retry. So at this point, you have everything that you need to know to use data validation in Excel effectively. Yes, there's more that you could learn, but you have all the basics that you need to be successful. I can go on and on about this topic. It is such a fascinating tool, simple yet powerful, and super low cost to run. I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did. It was a lot of fun for me creating this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and have a great day. I'll catch you in the next video.